So one of my cats is meowing very loudly from the other room. The other one is coughing up a hairball right now. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing wonderful today. I know we are well into 2026, but I still thought it would be fun to talk about the 26 books that I have on my list to read in 2026. So get cozy, grab a warm beverage, grab something fun to drink, and let's just chat about books, shall we? My drink of choice for today is the Cosmic Stardust by Alani. Oh yeah. So how I've kind of broken up this list is into different genres, different categories, and then we'll go through and talk about each individual book. So starting off with new releases. These are new releases coming out by some of my favorite authors that I would really like to read this year. So obviously I don't have the physical copies of them just yet, but I will. And because I put them on this list, it gives me motivation to read them. So to start us off, we have My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney, which by the time this video goes up, this book I think would have already come out. It came out on January 20th here. Some of her books have been a hit and miss for me, but I will still always read any book that she puts out. And so this is her new release for this year, and I'm so excited for it. This one says, Eden Fox, an artist on the brink of her big break, sets off for a run before her first exhibition. When she returns to the home she recently moved into, Spyglass, an enchanting old house in Hope Falls, nothing is as it should be. Her key doesn't fit. A woman, eerily similar to her, answers the door, and her husband insists that the stranger is his wife. One house, one husband, two women, someone is lying. So that sounds really intriguing. So I'm really excited to read this one in the coming year. Then we have Just Friends by pham. I myself, like probably a lot of people on this platform, love pham's videos. Watching her booktube videos really got me back into reading back in 2023, I would say, and so I'm so excited to finally read her debut novel. This one says, Blair and Declan were inseparable growing up, best friends who knew each other better than anyone else. But when an impulsive kiss took them from friends to something more, everything changed. Just as quickly as their romance started, one moment shattered it all, leaving them with nothing but heartbreak and silence. Now, 4 years later, Blair is back in their coastal hometown of Seabrook to support her mom and care for her great-aunt Lottie as her health declines. To make ends meet, Blair applies to work at a coffee shop only to discover it's managed by none other than Declan, the boy she loved, the boy she lost, the boy who still makes her heart race. Does that just not sound like the cutest book ever? I am a huge fan of the friends to lovers trope, especially childhood friends to lovers. Because if you didn't know, I actually grew up with my husband Wyatt. I have known him since I was about 6 years old. So I love books that just incorporate that childhood friends to lovers trope. So I'm very excited to read this one. It comes out on March 3rd. Then we have the next book in a series that I love, and that is Finlay Donovan Crosses the Line. This is the 6th book in the Finlay Donovan series. I absolutely love this series. I think they are just really fun, cozy mysteries to read. I love the blending of comedy, romance, but also kind of that mystery. I will say I did not enjoy book 4 and 5 as much as I did the first 3 books in this series, but any book that El Cosimano puts out, I will absolutely read. So this one comes out March 17th. It says, life hasn't been easy for Finlay Donovan lately, but it just got a whole lot harder. Her nanny and partner in crime, Vero, has been extradited. Wow, I cannot read. Extradited from Virginia to Maryland, where she's facing criminal charges for a theft she swears she didn't commit. Prisoner to an ankle bracelet as she awaits her trial, Vero is forced to live with her overbearing mother and noisy aunt. Threatening messages keep arriving on her mother's door, demanding Vero turn over the money or else. And if she doesn't figure out who really stole her former sorority's treasury fund, her next home might be a prison cell. Vero is one of my favorite characters in this series. I absolutely love her. I think she's just a fun, spunky gal. So I'm excited to read this one. Then we have another book by one of my all-time favorite authors, and that is The Shippers by Katherine Center. I have almost read every single book that Katherine Center puts out. I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 left from like early on that I have not read yet, but I am so excited for this one. It comes out on May 19th. And it says, after a whole lifetime of being bad at love, JoJo Burton decides to solve her intimacy issues once and for all at her sister's destination wedding on a cruise ship. With the help of a little pop psychology, She diagnoses herself with a fixation on the neighborhood guy who was her first crush and first kiss, and just who happens to be a newly divorced wedding guest. And she decides to woo him during the cruise for some long-delayed closure. Only problem is her sister's a little busy being a bride at the moment. So JoJo ropes in her childhood bestie, Cooper Watts, to be her wingman. Cooper, who RSVP'd no, but then showed up anyway. Cooper, who left town without a word 4 years earlier and moved to London. Cooper, who was, if she's honest, the worst heartbreak of JoJo's life. I think we all know where this is going. Again, I love Katherine Center's books. They're just such fun romance reads, perfect for summer, so I am so excited for this one. Then the last new release that we have is Dolly All the Time by Annabelle Monaghan. Again, I love Annabelle Monaghan's books. I've actually read every single book that she has put out, so I'm so excited for her new release. This one says, if they begin by pretending, can they end with something real? Dolly Brick has never met a problem she couldn't solve. Not when her mom left when she was 12, not at 39 when she moves with her son back to Whitfield, Rhode Island, for the summer to keep her dad and brother from losing the family home. So when she comes across Stuart Whitfield, an annoyingly handsome Scion, how do you say that word? Cien? We're just going to move past that. With a flat tire at the wrong end of a very public, very humiliating breakup, it's in her nature to help. But Stuart's proposed arrangement ends up being more than either of them bargained for, because as public dinners and high society benefits turn into sunset boat rides and swinging on the porch, Dolly starts to feel something more than helpful. She's never relied on anyone besides herself. Can she really start now? Also, this cover is just absolutely adorable. So I'm so excited to read that one. That one comes out May 26th, just in time for summertime. So those are all of the new releases that I've put on my list that are coming out this year that I'm really excited to get to. Now moving on to the next category, which would be just regular fiction. Starting off, we have a couple books that were on my list to read in 2025 that I did not get to, so I'm putting them on this list again because I really want to read these books, and I've been wanting to read them for a while, and so finally I need to read them, okay? First, we have The Lies We Leave Behind by Noelle Salazar. This is a historical fiction following Kate during World War II, who decides to become a nurse in the Pacific, but then she gets injured, which gets her reassigned to the English countryside, where she now has to figure out what to do with the rest of her life. I have read The Flight Girls by Noelle Salazar, and I really enjoyed that one, so I'm excited to read another book by her. Next, we have another book that was on my 2025 TBR that I did not get to, and that is The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. I love Ruta Sepetys. I've read 2 books by her. If you really want to get into historical fiction, I always recommend her because her chapters are really short. They're seriously only like 3 to 4 pages long a piece, and so it's really easy to either binge a bunch of the book or to read kind of in small increments. But this one follows Daniel, who goes to Madrid, Spain during the 1950s to kind of reconnect with his culture a little bit. He loves photography. This one says, a heart-wrenching novel about identity, unforgettable love, repercussions of war, and the hidden violence of silence, inspired by the true post-war struggles of Spain, which I've actually been to Madrid, Spain, and so I think it'd be really fun to read this one since I've actually visited that country before. But yes, love Ruta Sepetys. Next, we have another book that was on my TBR last year that I did not get to, and that is The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. I have actually owned this book, I think, since the end of 2022, so it has been sitting on my shelf for a very long time, and I feel like this is one of those books where I know I'm going to enjoy it. I know it's going to be emotionally devastating, and I think that's why I haven't picked it up yet, because just kind of with some stuff going on in my personal life right now, I'm not sure if I could emotionally handle reading this book at the moment, but I'm hoping to this year. If you're unfamiliar with The Nightingale, this one follows 2 sisters during World War II living in France as they experience the Germans taking over France and end up getting separated. I've been wanting to read this book for a really long time, as you can imagine, since it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time, so this is the year, okay? I'm telling myself, you guys can hold me accountable. This is the year that I read this book, okay? Then we have a book that became popular, I think, just in the last year or so, and that is The Favorites by Elaine Fargo. I don't know much about this book other than it follows a ice duo, so let's kind of read the synopsis a little bit here. It says, she might not have a famous name, funding, or her family's support, but Katriana Shaw has always known that she was destined to become an Olympic skater. when she meets Heath Rocha, I think is how you say it, a lonely kid stuck in the foster care system. Their instant connection makes them a formidable duo on the ice. Clinging to skating and each other to escape their turbulent lives, Kat and Heath go from childhood sweethearts to champion ice dancers, captivating the world with their scorching chemistry, rebellious style, and roller coaster relationship. So I do know there is some romance in this one. There's a little bit of drama, and I've never actually read a book about ice skaters before, so I think this one will be really, really good. Another kind of sports fiction I want to read is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm kind of currently making my way through her backlog, and I know this is one of her newer releases just in the past couple of years. But this one follows Carrie Soto, who is a tennis player, and at the time of her retirement is the greatest tennis player of all time. But then 6 years later, somebody ends up beating her world record, so she comes out of retirement. She is also known for kind of being, I think, a brash, very blunt person, tells it like it is, has no filter whatsoever. I don't know much about tennis, but I do know I enjoy Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing, so I'm excited to read this one. Then the last one in the fiction category is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This one takes place during the 1970s, where two siblings go missing 18 years apart at the exact same summer camp. So even though it is more in the fiction category, there is mystery elements. I've heard the twist at the end is wild. I've also heard the audiobook is really good too, which, you know me, I'm a sucker for a good audiobook. So I think this one would be really perfect to read during the summertime because, again, it kind of takes place at a summer camp during the 70s, so it's got like a little historical fiction in there too. And I think also, wasn't it a Goodreads Choice Award? Maybe a nominee, maybe not a winner, but I do know it was raved about on Goodreads, so I'm excited to read this one. Moving on to a genre that I'm really hopeful to get into in this coming year, and that is sci-fi, which I realized I forgot a book, so hold on. Anywho, I've been really interested in getting into sci-fi, and I have some good picks that I feel like is a good place to start. So I think 2026 is going to be my sci-fi era. Starting off with a book that I have actually already read, and that is Project Hail Mary by Angie Weir. I really wanted to read this one before the movie comes out later this year, and I listened to the audiobook. Audiobook, like everyone else says, was absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I will say, kind of like a lot of the scientific terms went over my head, but not enough that it took me out of the story. I was still able to follow along the characters and what was happening with the plot. If you are unfamiliar with Project Hail Mary, this one follows Ryland Grace, who is a middle school science teacher who ends up getting recruited for a space mission that could determine the life or death of Earth. But then he ends up waking up on a spaceship, and he's the only crew member that is left alive. So it says, a lone astronaut, an impossible mission, and an ally he'll never imagine. So now that I've read the book, I'm really excited to see the movie and would highly recommend this one. Then we have another one that I've heard nothing but good things about, and that is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This one is kind of more a sci-fi thriller, if I understand that correctly. This one follows Jason, who is a professor, happily married, has a son, is living a great life, and then all of a sudden he gets knocked over the head, knocked unconscious, and when he wakes up, he's no longer married to his wife, his son doesn't exist, and he is not a professor at a university, but instead a scientist who has made this great discovery. That just sounds like a mind-bending, twisty type of book, which I've kind of been craving for a while. So I'm excited to read this one, and if I end up liking the book, I'm excited to watch the TV show. Another kind of popular sci-fi book in the sci-fi genre is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This one I know a lot of people say is like the Hunger Games, but in space. But I think the part of the Hunger Games that it gets compared to a lot is not so much like the games in the Hunger Games themselves, but kind of how the world has been broken up into different districts. Because if I understand correctly, it is an alternate universe where each person is classified by a color, with red being the lowest of the low, basically slave prisoner, and then I think gold being the highest tier, and our main character has to break out of prison and make his way through the tier ranks to save the world. I could be explaining this completely wrong. And the back of the book does not really give much of a description, which kind of intrigues me more. But I've heard nothing but good things about this series, and so I'm excited to read it this year. Then we have, this is kind of a fiction with elements of sci-fi, and that is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I read Station 11 by her, and I really enjoyed that one, so I'm excited to read some more books by her. And I don't know much about this one, so let's read it together. It's a novel of art, time, love, and plague that takes the reader from Vancouver Island in 1912 to a dark colony on the moon nearly 500 years later, unfurling a story of humanity across centuries and space. So I think in this one you're following like 3 or 4 different characters from different periods of time as it spans across these 500 years. So it's got a little bit of time travel in it. And because I enjoyed Station 11 and Emily's writing, I'm really excited to read this book by her. Then the last book I have in the sci-fi category that I would like to read is The Ministry of Time by Kaylee and Bradley. This one, of course, I picked up because of the lovely Haley pham, who absolutely raved about this book. With this one, if I understand correctly, the British government has figured out a way to pluck people from history and bring them into the present time. And so you're following our main character, whose job is to help those historical people transition from their time period to the present time. So introducing them to things like a washing machine, a dishwasher, Spotify, social media, YouTube, like all of that kind of stuff. And then I think there's a little bit of romance that blooms from the main character and this person that she's basically been assigned to, which I think is an 1800s soldier, maybe? He's a commander, so I would imagine he's a soldier. And he gets plucked from his time right before his death and brought into the present time. So you got some time travel in there, a little bit of romance, kind of literary fiction, but I'm excited to read this one as well. Okay, now we're moving on to the largest category that takes over my TBR for 2026, and that is fantasy. I did this last year too, where I was in a really big fantasy mood. And so, of course, a lot of the books that I put on my 25 books for 2025 happen to be fantasy. But then about halfway through last year, I did not want to pick up a fantasy book. And then, of course, because of the fall and winter months, I went back to fantasy. So hopefully I can make my way through all of these because there's quite a bit. My kitty is here for emotional support. Hi, how are you? Why won't you love me? It's okay. Can you say hi? Are you being shy? Say hi. Starting off, we have The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. Now, I don't know much about this book other than that it comes before the Dance of Thieves duology, which I did have Dance of Thieves on my list in 2025, and I did not get to it because I realized I wanted to go back and read The Kiss of Deception first. Now, I know some say you don't necessarily have to read Kiss of Deception before Dance of Thieves, but I'm very much somebody who likes to know the whole world building process first, so I decided to go back to this one. So this one says, she steals ancient documents from the Chancellor's secret collection. She is pursued by bounty hunters sent by her own father. She is Princess Leia, 17, first daughter of the House of the Morgan. The kingdom of Morgan is steeped in tradition and the stories of a bygone world, but some traditions Leia can't abide, like having to marry someone she's never met to secure a political alliance. So she flees on her wedding day. So we got some arranged marriage, steals some important documents, runs away on her wedding night. That just sounds really interesting to me. And look at this pretty cover. Like, come on. How can you not read this book with this pretty cover? So I'm excited to read this series this coming year. Then we have Fireborn by Rosaria Munda. This is a YA fantasy series that takes place at an academy where the students are competing to become a part of the dragon riding fleet that then end up fighting in a war that's going on. Which I know kind of sounds similar to Fourth Wing, but this one happens to be a young adult, so therefore there's no spice in it. I do know that this one is also only a trilogy, so I think that is much more manageable than finishing the rest of the Fourth Wing series. But yes, this one says, Annie and Lee were only children when revolution changed their world, giving everyone a chance to test into the governing class of dragon riders. Now they are both rising stars in the new regiment, even though Annie's low-born family was executed by Dragonfire, while Lee was born to the very aristocrats who used to rule the city. A childhood at the same orphanage forged their friendship, and 7 years of training have made them rivals for the top position in the dragon riding fleet. So we have childhood friends to academic rivals in an academy where you learn to ride dragons. Like, that just sounds amazing. So I'm excited to read this one. And we have another series that I've heard nothing but good things about, and that is The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. I don't know much about this one other than that our main character is stuck in this prison cell, but I think has the ability to heal people, but then the whole book takes place in this prison. And I've also heard that the twist at the end is wild and makes you want to finish the rest of the trilogy, which I'm a sucker for a good twist, so I'm excited to read this one, but let's read the back real quick. It says 17-year-old Kiva has spent the last 10 years fighting for survival in the notorious death prison Zalandov? When the rebel queen is captured, Kiva is charged with keeping the terminally ill woman alive long enough for her to undergo the trial of ordeal, a series of elemental challenges against the torments of air, fire, water, and earth, assigned to only the most dangerous of criminals. Ooh, okay, that sounds good. So we got some fantasy elements, got some trials in there. Sounds like a good one for sure. Then we have a book that I've actually already read, and I'll give my review in just a sec, but that is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. This one takes place in 1848 London, where a fae queen ends up taking over the human world. And then several hundred years later, there's a competition held where 6 human girls end up competing for the fae prince's hand in marriage. But in order to do so, they have to go through a series of trial and competition. And like I said, I've actually already read this book and I gave it 4.5 stars. It was so good. Very similar to, I would say, Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Cruel Prince. So if you liked either one of those series, then you would definitely like this one. But the sequel to this book comes out later this year, so I'm excited to read that one. Then we have a book that was also on my list for 2025 that I did not get to, much to my husband's chagrin, and that is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, hear me out. I have read The Hobbit, love The Hobbit, really enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies. I just have never read Lord of the Rings before, and it kind of intimidates me. So I do know that this one is not going to be a fast read. I'm going to intentionally take my time reading it just so I can enjoy it. But if you don't know, my husband Wyatt is also a huge reader, and this is one of his all-time favorite series. So I feel like it's only fair that I read it, just so that we can talk about it together. Which I feel like I don't need to explain what Lord of the Rings is about. But if you don't know what it's about, go look it up. Just we'll leave it at that. How about that? And we have kind of another romantasy, switching gears here, and that is Thorn Season by Kira Azar. I don't know much about this one other than that our main character possesses illegal magic and ends up kind of having to go undercover in this fantasy world. Because it says, an heiress possessing illegal magic who has more to lose than just your secrets. A harsh and glittering royal court where the threat of discovery lurks around every corner. 2 beguiling and very dangerous men who might be her salvation or her ruin. It's rose season at the palace, but survival will depend on becoming the most vicious of thorns. I also picked this up because I find the cover very intriguing, along with the really pretty sprayed edges. Like, hold on, let me just show you underneath the dust cover. Like, is that not like one of the most prettiest books ever? Anywho, but it sounds interesting, and then I think there's set to be a sequel that comes out later this fall in 2026 here. Then we have a book that I picked up last year that I did not get to, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabah Tahir. So sorry if I'm butchering that name. But this one follows a brother and sister where the brother is a soldier and the sister is a slave. But then the brother gets convicted of a crime he didn't actually commit, so then the sister kind of has to become the soldier in order to save her brother. This is also the first book in, I think, a 5-book series, but they all kind of have just these really pretty covers. So it's like there's one that's red, blue, green, purple, and then when you put the spines together, they all make like a really cool picture. So I will say the text is kind of small, but the plot sounds very intriguing, so excited to read this one. When we have a series that kind of blew up on TikTok, which I realized a lot of these fantasy books are first books in series. So I might be in trouble series-wise this year, but that's okay. Anywho, this series became very popular on a booktok, and that is Assistant to the Villain. If you're unfamiliar with the series, you're following Evie, who ends up responding to an ad in a newspaper saying a villain is looking for an assistant. And so she's like, what do I have to lose? So she goes and applies. But what she does not expect is to develop a crush on the villain, and I think that is just the cutest thing ever. I do know that this has a slow burn romance, like really slow burn, and so I'm actually really excited for that one. I've also heard it's just really cute and whimsical and funny, and that the romance is really, really sweet, so I'm excited to read this one. Then we have a book that was a new release in 2025, and that is Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. This is the special edition by a book subscription called, I think you say it, Allurial? I'll link them down below in case you're curious, but it's a romantasy book subscription, and they did this gorgeous edition of Wild Reverence. Like, look at these pretty sprayed edges. And then, of course, the cover, too, is just absolutely gorgeous. This is a book that takes place in the same world as Divine Rivals, which I did read that one last year and really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to kind of read a little bit of this prequel here. But this one says, born in the firelit domain of the Underrealm, Matilda is the youngest goddess of her clan. Blessed with humble messenger magic, she uses to carry words and letters through the realms. But the gods will kill for power, and Matilda holds a secret she must hide from even her dearest allies. And there is a mortal who dreams of her, though they have never met in the waking world. 10 years ago, Vincent of Beckett wrote to Matilda on the darkest night of his life, begging the goddess he befriended in dreams to help him. His request went unanswered, and Vincent became a hardened, irreverent lord of the river who has long forgotten Matilda, until she comes tumbling into his bedroom window with a letter for him. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. Like I said, I really enjoyed Divine Rivals, and so I'm really excited to read this one by her. I realized I forgot to put all of those books on my cart, but we got it fixed now. Then I have a book by an author that kind of intimidates me, but I'm also curious to get more into his writing, and that is Brandon Sanderson. This is Tress of the Emerald Sea, which I know was one of his secret projects several years ago when it first came out. So I'm hoping that by starting with maybe a standalone, it'll be a good introduction to his writing. And then who knows, maybe I'll move on to the Mistborn trilogy and kind of explore his writing a little bit more. But I don't know much about this one other than a lot of people compare it to The Princess Bride, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I'm excited to read this one. It says, the only life Tress has known on her island home in an emerald green ocean has been a simple one, with the simple pleasures of collecting cups brought by sailors from faraway lands and listening to stories told by her friend Charlie. But when his father takes him on a voyage to find a bride and disaster strikes, Tress must stow away on a ship and seek the sorceress of the deadly midnight sea. Amid the spore oceans where pirates abound, can Tress leave her simple life behind and make her own place, sailing a sea where a single drop of water can mean instant death? This one just sounds like a very cute, cozy fantasy to read. And like I said, I'm excited to explore Brandon Sanderson's writing a little bit more. All right, then the last book on my TBR for 2026 is a doozy. Okay, this is going to be a little outside my comfort zone, but I'm looking forward to it. And that is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This one I know kind of was popular when it first came out, but it really started to blow up, I think, kind of towards the end of 2025. I am not usually a high fantasy reader, so like I said, this one kind of intimidates me a little bit, but the plot sounds intriguing enough that I think I can do it. Not to mention I already have the second book on my shelf, so might as well get cracking on this one. But this one says, the Katanin, so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Republic, the hierarchy, may rule the world now, but they do not know everything. I tell them my name is Vis Telemus. I tell them I was orphaned after a tragic accident 3 years ago, and the good fortune alone has led to my acceptance into their most prestigious school. I tell them that once I graduate, I will gladly join the rest of civilized society in allowing my strength, my drive, and my focus, what they call will, to be leached away and added to the power of those above me, as millions already do, as all must eventually do. I tell them that I belong, and they believe me. But the truth is that I have been sent to the academy to find answers, to solve a murder, to search for an ancient weapon, to uncover secrets that may tear the Republic apart, and that I will never, ever cede my will to the empire that executed my family. So you're following our main character who kind of goes as a undercover spy into this elite academy, where he basically infiltrates it from the inside to try and take it down. And that sounds really interesting and really fascinating to me. So it is a thick one for sure. But honestly, one of my goals for 2026 is to read quality titles over quantity. And sometimes in order to do that, I have to read really long books. So there you have it, folks. That is my 26 books that I would like to read in 2026. Like I said, I'm excited to read all of these. These are all books that I am very interested in reading, so I'm hoping that'll help with my motivation and that 2026 is the year that we finally complete this list. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as go check out my Instagram channel, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!